Welcome back to the Horn Takes podcast, the best Texas football and baseball talk destination on the web. This is the Bullpen, where it's all about Texas baseball. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and click the bell to get notified when any of our content is available. We'll be doing some ticket giveaways, Texas baseball ticket giveaways throughout the year on our live stream, so you won't want to miss that. He is Zachary Semm of orangebloods.com, contributor at secunfiltered.com. You can find Zach on X at Zach at the Dish right there on your screen. Give him a follow for Texas baseball news and analysis. Zach, thanks for joining us tonight. How are you doing?
Absolutely. Yeah, doing great. It's a wonderful evening. The weather's warmed up. It's time for baseball.
Absolutely, man. I'm getting excited. I am Sean Redfern of the Horn Takes podcast, contributor at secunfiltered.com. You can find me on X at Sean_Redfern. You can find the Horn Takes podcast on TikTok, X, and YouTube at Horn Takes. Again, make sure to follow and subscribe. Send us your questions about Texas baseball in the chat. Zach, we got 10 days till Texas baseball. How excited are you about this 2025 Texas baseball season?
Yeah, I'm really excited. You know, it's there's a lot of unknowns, I guess, with a new coaching staff, and you got player turnover and, brand new pitching staff essentially in a lot of ways. And so just seeing how the kinks work out, seeing who steps up to the plate, pun intended. And, there's some really exciting young talent on the team. So that's always fun to watch as they grow and work through the travails of baseball season.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the biggest sort of interesting storylines to me about this team. A lot of new faces, especially on that pitching staff. I think we're only returning just a tick over 50% of the innings pitched last year. Let's talk about this alumni game that we just watched. I'm sure you were there, Zach. You were there covering it, correct?
I was indeed. Yeah, it was beautiful. 76 degrees and sunny in February. Crazy.
Yeah, I was extremely jealous. Still a little bit cold over the weekend here where we're at in the Panhandle, but we got up to almost 90 degrees yesterday. And then it dipped back down into the 60s today, and it'll be back up in the 80s tomorrow. But the weather was phenomenal for the alumni game. I think they said roughly 5,000, maybe 5,000 plus folks showed up. It looked like a great crowd. There are a lot of great activities going on. Meet the new players, meet the old players, batting practice, throw on the field. They do a really good job getting the community involved, getting the fans involved. Texas beats the alumni for the second straight year, maybe third straight year. They win that one 6-3. What are your initial takeaways just from that alumni game?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you have an alumni game, it's always going to be like, what's the effort, right? Are the alumni there, like, kind of putting charge into it? How do they look? They've only been practicing for a couple of weeks now, right? And so the team is always still coming together, still gelling. None of the pitchers have really been stretched out. But, first thing that stood out was the pitching actually looked really good. There were some freshman moments. There were some guys that got a little sped up, a little amped up. They haven't played in front of 5,000 people before.
Right.
But it was really good to see a guy like freshman Dylan Valantis come out and just be steady, right? He's not all over the place. He's harnessing himself. He's staying within the bounds that are being called by Coach Max Weiner. And then to see a couple of other arms that, like Ruger Riojas, like everyone's talked about him all fall. And I've seen him a couple times. Seeing him pitch in a scrimmage or inter squad's one thing. Seeing him pitch to a couple of major leaguers is a lot different, right? They're going to see those things before. And so seeing those guys do well was really exciting.
Yeah, I do I just started doing, it's called the 12 pack. It's basically like my thoughts on any games. We'll do that continuously on secunfiltered.com. But we did our first one after the alumni game. And that's one of the things I talked about was the pitching. I was really, really impressed with the pitching. And I know it's just one game, but you look back to last year, we were really, really inconsistent on the mound. And I think ultimately that's probably what kept Texas from maybe being one of those outside type contributors or outside type teams to possibly make a run into Omaha. The pitching just wasn't there, wasn't consistent enough. So as you said, it was really good to see a guy like Dylan Valantis come in and pitch 3 really solid innings. I think the only time he got in trouble was a throwing error. Honestly, I think he gave up a run due to a throwing error. So outside of that, he pitched a really clean game. I really like the way he could locate his off-speed pitch on the outside of the plate, but draw it in for a strike. That's good stuff. Anytime you can do stuff like that. And he was able to do that very consistently. You mentioned Ruger Riojas, man. He another guy that did pitch 3 innings, and man, it was really impressive. He was lighting up the radar gun and also able to locate his off-speed pitch. So I think the pitching was exciting. I also think we got a chance to look at some guys like Adrian Rodriguez, which is a name that we hadn't heard much about. We don't get to go to the fall stuff and like a lot of you guys do. So we had just started hearing about Adrian Rodriguez possibly being plugged in at third base and being the starter there. He had a pretty decent game defensively, was able to hit an opposite field home run towards the middle of the game. So the power's there. They were talking about it on the broadcast, and maybe you can talk to this a little bit. When he showed up at Texas, kind of a skinny little kid, he was tall but skinny. Now he's pushing 200 pounds, which is, and I think for a baseball player, if you can get around that 200 plus range, depending on your height, you're filling out really good, and you got a nice baseball body. Did you notice a difference in his body from, say, fall scrimmages and things like that to this alumni game?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, last year, the guys that came in and we were like, man, they've matured. Certainly Max Blue had kind of transformed his body a little bit. Guys like Galvan had kind of bulked up and become what they are. Jalen Flores had put on really good weight. And then this year, coming into the fall, you look at the freshmen and this team has gotten a lot bigger. It's got a lot more physicality than last year's team and the year before that even. And so what was fun was, I had folks texting me and they're like, hey, what do you notice about the team? The first thing was like physicality. These guys are huge. It looks like one of the Stanford teams walking in. Because if you remember back in the day, like Stanford would walk in with 6'2" to 6'5", and Texas would walk out there. Every single guy was 5'10", 5'11", maybe. And it was like, what the hell is going on here? But so, I had saw Adrian. I had heard he and Casey Borba and Sam Richardson were going to be kind of the 3 guys they were looking at third base early on. He plays a really good brand of ball. Adrian's one of those guys that in high school he played shortstop, and that's really what you want. You bring in those elite middle of the pack guys or middle of the field guys, and then you move them over to see how do they handle with the throwing angles, the footwork, the ability to adjust. But yeah, he's gained 15 pounds, and I think that just speaks to one of the savviest things Coach Schlossnagle and the staff did was retain Matt Couch. I mean, it sounds ridiculous. It sounds just what it is, but he legitimately is one of the best strength and conditioning coaches in the nation. And, look at Will Gasparino. He's put on another 20 pounds. The guy looks jacked now. Yeah.
He's another guy that I was like, wow, he's been eating.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny. You're like just kind of listing off the 12 pack as I kind of was thinking about it and writing it on Sunday. So Will Gasparino looked like he has definitely put in some work at the buffet and in the weight room, but it's all good weight. He's not fat by any means. He's still the thing about that guy is he's 6'6". He's long everywhere. He's got a lot of room to continue. I mean, Will Gasparino could be a guy, and he probably won't be, but if he makes it and plays long enough, he could be a guy that plays at 240, 245 pounds, I think, because he's 6'6". And he's just got so much space to pack muscle on. So it'll be really interesting to see how that pays off for him this year. I hope he didn't lose any of his speed, because that's one of the things we really liked about him out in center field was his ability to cover ground. He absolute gazelle out there. I don't think he probably has lost any speed. It looks like the weight's good. And you mentioned the physicality of this team. You look at a guy like Cole Chamberlain. He's coming in as a true freshman. He's 6'2", 215 pounds. Yeah. You got Max Ballou, who's about 6'1", 6'2", 210 pounds too. And he may be bigger than that now. He was a big kid last year, but if he's, certainly with another year of work, and that's one of my points on the 12 pack as well, was this team to me, you talk about Texas needing to get SEC ready on the football roster. This baseball roster looks really SEC ready to me. Not only the guys in the lineup, but you look at that pitching staff. I think 5-6 guys were touching mid-90s in that alumni game, and that's something we did not have last year. We had a couple guys that could throw at 90, and you couldn't really depend on them for a lot of innings. Most games, some games you could, some games you couldn't. So it'll be really interesting to see how those guys can can be from a consistency standpoint. I'm interested to see what goes on with the pitching staff, because I've been hearing, I can't remember the kid's name off the top of my head right now, but the transfer from, I believe it's Indiana State.
Yeah, Jared Spencer. He'll be here
Jared
Friday
Spencer.
night. Yeah.
That's what I've heard a lot. We did not see him on Saturday, did we?
No, he pitched the day before.
So he had a bullpen the day before.
Yeah, so Max has all the guys on a 12-week ramp program coming out of the fall. Because in the fall, the staff does not want anyone to pitch more than 2 innings. And then you had guys like Max Grubbs who were shut down completely. Ace Whitehead was shut down completely. And so as they come out of the fall and they start entering the program, he's got them ramped up. And then it's starting to see, well, how does their arm respond? Are they rubber? Do they get a little tight? Is a guy that we can use more than once a week? Can we start stretching them out? Well, how do they hold their velo? How do they hold their shape? How do they hold their mentality even as we start extending them out? And so, yeah, you didn't see Luke Harrison. You didn't see Jared Spencer. You didn't see a number of guys because they had pitched the day before or they were going to pitch the day after. But yeah, you mentioned velocity-wise. I love the stat that we heard back in the fall was this current pitching rotation has an average of 7 miles per hour faster fastball than last year's rotation. And that just goes to show you, I mean, they brought in guys that can throw hard, right? Mm-hmm. And Saul Stengel likes to say, look, it doesn't matter how hard you throw ball 4. At the same time, you got to have some juice. And this team certainly has some guys that have some juice. So.
Yeah, I think a lot last year, the guys, even when they were throwing strikes, they were just physically kind of outmatched in a lot of cases. You really, from the starters, you really only had LBJ that could come up there and just kind of outmatch somebody physically. Just say, I'm throwing a fastball right down the middle and you're not going to hit it. A lot of the other guys, and not that they're pitching slow, but I mean, these kids today are seeing 80, high 80s, sometimes depending on where they grow up and play high school baseball. And certainly in their summer ball stuff, they're seeing guys throwing low 90s and a few guys throwing up in the upper 90s. It's just a different world today. So I don't think you can trot guys up there anymore unless they're just pinpoint accuracy and just can hit their spots perfectly. That they don't have some velocity. So really good to see. I hadn't realized that was the stat, but I knew just by watching those guys, the ones that did pitch on Saturday, I was like, those guys are throwing a lot harder than what we've seen in a while on the 40 acres.
That was the biggest issue with last year's staff was they would get into games and, they couldn't go 6 innings. They couldn't go 7 innings. And it wasn't because they don't have stuff, right? Like they have good stuff, but they had to work in so deep in counts because they couldn't get a strikeout. Their whiff rate was unbelievably low. Mm-hmm. And so when you start looking at the metrics, you're going, well, if they can't get a strikeout, they're going to give up more contact or they're going to walk more guys, putting more pressure on them. And it was just kind of this cascading effect where it affected the defense. So you saw more errors last year than you typically would of a Texas team. You saw more innings getting chewed up by guys. And so, yeah, it was just kind of the snowball effect. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've seen from this squad in the rotation under Max Wieners. Look, they focus on getting a strike. And, they've said, if you can't throw strikes, you're not going to throw for us. And it's not an indictment against the kid. It's just like, hey, you got to refine your stuff. So,
right. Yeah. I think the other thing you mentioned, guys going 6-7 innings, maybe the longer you go in a game, the more the lineup gets to see you. And I think if you just don't have electric stuff, they start to figure things out, and these guys are all good hitters. They're going to find a way to know what's coming and get a good swing on it. If they do that, it's not a great chance. 3 out of 10 be amazing. 2.5 out of 10 times they can probably get you in play. And like you said, get them in play. People make mistakes, or you just hit it where they're not, and that's all good stuff. We talk to us about who are the 3 guys that stood out to you from the scrimmage on Saturday.
So I'll give you 3 pitchers and 3 hitters. Okay. On the pitching staff, certainly Volantis didn't look necessarily like a freshman out there. His body still has a way to mature. That's going to be Matt Couch helping him lead throughout this year and then especially next offseason. But I thought he showed really good maturity out there. Aiden Moffitt is a guy that when you talk about lighting up the radar gun, he hit 98 in an alumni game, which is not something you typically see. But he's got a cannon of an arm. It's just how he controls that pitch. Because if you look at a pitch of his fastball, that thing has some serious late life and cut. And sometimes it's arm side cut, sometimes it's glove side cut. You can't tell me that he knows where it's going every single time. And so it's just, it's managing that control. But I really liked what I've seen from him. I think he's worked on his mechanics a little bit. And so that was really impressive. And then, I mentioned Riojas earlier, but I got to give love to the uncle of the team, the old man, Will Mercer. Not this past fall, but 2 falls ago, back in 2023, he pitched 3 innings and was unhittable. No one could touch the guy. Unfortunately, goes down with the elbow injury. He's back, and he hit 97. So he's PR'd his fastball by 3 miles an hour this year already, coming back off an injury. And so I really liked what I saw from him. It'll be interesting to see how he rebounds every week. But, yeah, those are the 3 guys that I think really impressed the most. On the hitting side, certainly Adrian Rodriguez, everyone's been talking about him. The coaches have been talking him up all fall for good reason. He doesn't play like a freshman. If you remember the first play of the game, the ball was a slow roller right to him. And, that's a tough play at Dish Falk on that turf. And so he judged it correctly, and he made the really great throw. And I think that got him going. He certainly had some nerves at the plate early on. He admitted that post game. But, he's a special kid. And I even had a kid or a trainer up in DFW over the Christmas break text me and goes, you're going to like what you're going to see. He's like, he's been refining, and he spent all Christmas break hitting against D1 batters or pitchers. I mean, and that shows, like, he looks prepared. The other guy, I've been talking him up since the fall, because I sat down to do some scouting and I was like, holy moly, who's this kid? And it was Cole Chamberlain, and he's really impressed me all throughout the fall with his hit tool. It's the way Pierce used to talk about Casey Borba last year. He just has a slow heartbeat at the plate. He's not rushing. He's really slowing things down. He's getting the bat through the zone really well and just making good contact. And then outside of that, I think you saw a glimpse of what Gasparino can be, right? He's shortened up that swing. He's going to be able to hit for power still, just because he can get extension. But the ability just to lace baseballs all over the field is, I think, what we're going to see a lot of his this year. And a much more patient approach. Last year, he was very quick to swing. He wanted to make contact so bad, and he wanted to kind of just prove and get extension that he overran his stride at times and was just out of form. So,
yeah, he struck out quite a bit last year. He struggled a lot at the plate, but like you said, when he did get the contact on it and did get extended, he can hit the ball a ton. Another guy you didn't mention while you're talking about hitters that I believe he had a 2-hit game was Farmer, and we talked about body types. He's kind of changed his body a little bit too. He looks a lot. He may not have added a ton of weight, but I think he's transformed his body. He looks a little more physical than he did last year. So yeah, I did the Horn Takes podcast best 3, and I just picked 3 because you could have picked a million. I had Riojas. I thought those 3 innings were really smooth, man. And he had the 4Ks. Obviously, he looked really dominant up there on the mound in his first action as a Longhorn. You mentioned him before, Aiden Moffitt. To me, that guy is the most electric out of any of those pitchers that we saw. I really like his stuff. His fastball just jumps out of his hand. That changeup he throws, I love a changeup. I think a changeup is one of the most underrated. I think it is the most underrated pitch in baseball. I don't think enough guys use it, which is crazy to me because it's just a fastball with a different grip. Yeah. So there's no reason not to throw it and try to make that part of your arsenal. And then I thought his slider was pretty good too, like kind of deceptively breaky. I don't know quite how to. I'm not a baseball guy. I will admit that, like 100%. So I'm probably not saying anything technically right, but something about his slider to me just kind of disappeared on those guys. They thought they were putting a good swing on it, and they just absolutely weren't. And then I had Cole Chamberlain as well, 2 for 3. That home run was amazing. His first swing, and he absolutely tattooed that ball. I think it was 109 miles an hour off the bat. So that's
109, 414.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Excellent exit velocity. So yeah, I got to admit, going back to the pitcher conversation, I was worried because I don't know anything about, and I've asked several of the guys we've had on the show the last few weeks, can you turn a pitching staff around that quick? I asked Harge that, and he said, absolutely. Yeah. They put in the work and they can get it done. And it looks like they have. And to your earlier point, they've gone out and they've got some guys that can throw the ball hard. If you can throw the ball hard, you can teach people how to pitch. But you can't teach velocity.
You look at what A&M did 2 years ago, right? They had one of the worst staffs in the SEC. Yeski leaves, goes to LSU when Wes Johnson leaves and takes the Georgia job. And, not an indictment against Yeski at all. I think he's a great pitching coach. He does a really great job down at LSU. But Max has an innate ability to translate not just the analytics piece, so breaking down their mechanics. Hey, you need to drop your arm slot a little bit, shape this pitch a little differently, release point, a little bit higher, a little bit lower, so you can repeat it. But he has an innate ability just to kind of translate the mental side of the game. And I think if you look at that across the entire staff, Schlossnagel's very good about the X's and O's, but he knows how to bring in these staff members that take full advantage of the mental game. Look at Tulowitzki. Yes, he's a long time, hitter. He's done all the things, Golden Gloves, etc. All he wants to talk about is the mental side of the game. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, there's a lot going on the hitting side, but if he can get a guy locked in mentally, that's half the battle. Same thing with the pitching side, right? You trust your stuff, and that's half the battle. So, yeah, it's very quick to turn around a staff. They has a lot of work that's gone into that. So, no one has seen Luke Harrison yet for the most part, but what Matt Couch has done with his body, what they've come back and done with him as he's, matured from his injury, which was now 2 seasons ago. I think everyone will be surprised about how he operates. He looks like a different kid out there. They lowered the arm slot on Andre Duplantier. Now his velo's ticked back up 93, 94, where it kind of was where he came in as a freshman. And so, yeah, I think we'll be surprised. The other stat that Schlossnagel hit us with in the fall was, look, the average start in the SEC is like 4.2 innings. Like you don't have guys going 7 innings every night unless you have like a Skeens or a Hagen or one of those.
Sure.
And so they might very well go to a 3-3, 3 approach or a 3-3-2-1 approach. They've got the bullpen arms. Now it's translating that in. Can you start? Can you stretch out a little bit? And then we got you. So
right. Yeah, I think it's interesting you talk about the mental side of it, because as our son was growing up, he played a ton of baseball, played all the way up through high school. That was the toughest thing to try to get those kids to understand. It's the physical part of it. Yeah, you have to be physically talented. You have to have some skill. But if you can be mentally right as you go up to bat or as you're pitching or as the ball's coming at you, those are the things that not everybody can do. And you look at a D1 baseball program, all these guys are physically good, or they wouldn't be there. It's not like D1 baseball programs are hurting for guys. There's probably a lot of really good players that are lining up hoping they can go to a big school like Texas that they just can't because the numbers don't work. So getting that mental side of it. Talk to me about Max Weiner. He's an intriguing hire, the arm farm. He looks like he might have a little bulldog in him, and I don't know how much you've been around him, but to me, he you talk about the mental side of the game. One of the things I used to talk to our pitchers about was like, and this is, 12, 13 years old. I'm just trying to get them hyped up, to not be nervous, basically. That's your plate, man. Go own that thing. Like, don't worry about this hitter. Just own that plate, hit the glove. Let's go. Is he kind of like maybe a different approach as a pitching coach in that type of manner? Or am I just making stuff up because I want it to be like that?
I think he wants the pitchers to be very prescribed, right? You have one goal. Your single goal is to land strike one. If you don't land strike one, you're already behind, right?
Right.
So now you failed your job. Now you're having to work twice as hard. So now your pitch selection is going to be expanded. And you pointed out earlier, the more times they see your pitch, the more times they get used to the timing, the release, the nuance of the spin. So the more you can hide that, the more that you can, hold off on having to go back to your slider a second time, or use that changeup maybe the third time around, is super important. And so, yeah, he's all about dominating the zone, right? That's his mantra. That's what he's famous for. But like I said, his ability to translate the mental side, I think, has been the biggest thing I've seen. And he's a fun guy to be around. He's a hard worker. I mean, this entire staff, they're grinders, man. They don't give up. They're
Sure.
constantly working. But yeah, he's a great guy, and he's a great teacher of baseball. I'll tell you that.
Obviously, he's a great teacher of the pitching game. I think everybody, all Texas fans, excited about this coaching staff. I think we were excited about what we saw on Saturday out of that guy. How much can we really take away from a game like that? Because let's be honest. They're going to play – they're going to play like 50, 60 games this year. None of those games are going to be a scrimmage against the alumni that are just getting ready to go to spring training here pretty quick. I think the pitchers actually report like this week or maybe next week. But so realistically, all the good things we saw, how much of that can we really take forward as we head to Globe Life in a couple weeks?
I think the things you always take away from an alumni game or a scrimmage like that, if the hitters just can't hit the ball, that's either really good or really bad. It's like always the oxymoron, right? Are your pitchers just amazing or your hitters just crap?
Right.
And so I think you saw a good mix of their ability to battle. Some of the, Cody Howard was really sharp a couple times, and he kind of delved back into last year where it kind of snowballed on him a little bit. But I think, the framework is there, and that's what you can see, which is what you want to see. They're not booting the ball all over the place. They're not misplaying stuff in the outfield. They were playing hard. And so that's what you want to see is the effort. You want to see that framework. And so, it's winning an alumni game is not going to translate to success long-term over the season. But I think it gives you a good idea for holistically what a team looks like. So,
yeah. I think we saw what some of the pieces could do. And like you mentioned, Cody Howard was a guy that, last year really struggled. And at times he was pretty good on Saturday. So I think you got to take that little bit and just say, he's got it. He can do it. We just got to get him a little more consistent. And there's some other guys that were the same way. We didn't see Max Ballou because I think he was under the weather or something like that. Would have really liked to see him, but we'll get to see him soon enough. And I have no questions about Max Ballou's ability to go pop a baseball and go run it down in the outfield. So these guys are headed to the Shriner Children's Baseball Showdown in Arlington. Globe Life not been very kind to the Texas Longhorns ever, basically. I think we've gone to this preseason tournament there a couple of times, I feel like, in the last 3 or 4 years.
Yep.
I don't think we've won a game there. We went to the Big 12 tournament there last year, and we did not win a game there. Is Texas going to be able to get a win at Globe Life? This is just a prediction question. You don't have to be right. Are we going to get a win in Globe Life on Valentine's weekend?
I believe we will, yes. I mean, I've been meaning to go look at the stats. Outside of the run where Texas made kind of the deep run in the Big 12 tournament and then came up a little short, they went 0-2 against, I think it was Cincinnati and Texas Tech maybe in the Big 12 tournament this past season.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they went 0-3 in preseason. And then Pierce always liked to alternate. So he'd go to Arlington one year, the next year go down to Houston, back and forth. Yeah. You obviously had the disaster that was the snow apocalypse back in 2021 where they didn't even get to train for, close to a week leading up to the game, and they just got obliterated by everyone.
Yeah.
But, Louisville's a solid club. They've got some really good pieces, especially on the pitching mound. So I think that'll be a really good test for the offense because that park plays a lot differently than what Texas is used to. Mm-hmm. They did lose their best infielder, Gavin Killen, to Tennessee. So, they were missing some pieces as well. The Ole Miss is always going to be a fun game. They've got Hunter Elliott back. I don't know if Texas will face him just depending on where he lines up in their rotation. Sure. But, they're a team that, they've had a couple of rough 2 years and they're looking to kind of make this their bounce back year. They've got a really exciting young freshman that's going to play the infield and start as well. And then Oklahoma State, I mean, they're favored to win the Big 12. Again, they got Nolan Schubart, who can hit the ball 7,000 feet. That guy is a monster. They got some other boppers. I haven't looked a ton at their pitching rotation quite yet. I'm starting to work on the out-of-conference write-ups, just have done the in-conference, the SEC stuff. But, I expect Oklahoma State is going to be a solid club. So that'll be a fight. They're going to want to win that game just for conference pride and be like, oh, you left, so now it's our turn. So
exactly. Yeah, I think Oklahoma State, they're ranked in the top 20, depending on whichever poll you look at. And it's really interesting sort of where Texas falls in all these polls, anywhere from 19th to, I believe, 7th in perfect game, and kind of anywhere in between. When they were the first ones to release theirs. And when I saw that, I was like, really? I don't know if I don't know if I like lean a little more towards trying to be realistic or what, but I saw that and I was like, that seems pretty high to me. When you consider what a lot of people, and then Ole Miss just a few seasons removed from a College World Series championship. So, the program has potential, right?
Yeah.
It's been a while since Louisville's been pretty good, I think, but are really good for a while. But they're another program that, if you've followed college baseball over the last 20 years, you've seen Louisville. You've heard of them. They've had some teams make some runs. You mentioned it earlier. I want to hear it again. What do you think the starting pitching rotation will see that weekend in Arlington? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, almost certainly you're going to see Jared Spencer Friday night there against Louisville. Against Ole Miss, I would not be surprised if you didn't see Luke Harrison get the Saturday night role and then Sunday go to Dylan Volantis.
So Dylan Volantis, we think, is a guy that the coaches are looking at and saying that this guy could be one of our starters.
Yeah, they're looking to stretch him out. That's one of the reasons you saw him early. They wanted to get him used to, well, this is what it takes to start a game. You go through the prep. They're like, if you remember talking to guys like Ty Madden, Pete Hansen, some of those guys, Ty Madden was an absolute maniac about his routine.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't mess with his routine before the game. He literally had it timed down to the minute. And so it's getting them ready for, this is what it takes. Like, you don't just get to hang out, stay loose, and then jump in. Like, you have to be very prescribed and making sure you're doing your long toss, making sure you're getting your body stretched out. And so I think that was pretty much done on purpose. Now, again, we didn't see Spencer and Harrison because they had pitched the day before. So some of it's timing, but
sure, you
line up Spencer for a reason on a Friday to do his work. You line up Harrison for a reason to do his work. You line up Volantis for a reason to do his work. He has an extra day off now. And so, yeah, I personally think Volantis will be day 3. But that's still subject to change. I mean, no one's whispered, hey, these are the 3. So,
yeah. So we've talked a lot about the pitching. Let's flip it around and talk a little bit about the offense before we move forward through kind of the schedule of this year. You got, I think right now you got penciled in Shoes at first. You got Casey Borba sitting in the DH role. What does that outing for Cole Chamberlain do? And what do we think we see with him? You look at that guy, and again, it was one game, so you can't, you might put him in the game and he may go 0 for 20 in his next 20 at bats. You just never know.
Yeah.
What do you think the staff is thinking? Do you think we'll see kind of a rotation between Borba and Chamberlain possibly, or do you think they think he's ready to slip behind the plate and actually play a position some as well as a freshman? What do you think all that kind of, because I feel like they've got more bats this year than they kind of know what to do with. They've got, you got Easton Winfield out there in left field. You brought in Ethan Mendoza from Arizona State. Easton Winfield, a guy, we didn't get to see a lot from him on Saturday, but he's a guy I'm really excited about because he single-handedly led his team in basically every offensive category as a true freshman. The one I really like is the 18 bags he took. I think that's a completely underrated part of baseball as well, as being able to run and steal bases. So he's a guy that can do that. What do you think maybe the plan is today, and what might we see kind of play out over time as we move into this 2025 season offensively?
Yeah, I think you've got the outfield is pretty well set. Left field's going to be Winfield, center field's going to be Gaspo, and then right field's going to be Ballou. Tommy Farmer will be your 4th option out there. Mm-hmm. From an infield standpoint, it's going to be Galvan behind the plate. Behind Galvan will be interesting. Oliver Service, which no one has talked about, had one of the best hitting falls of anyone else from a percentage standpoint.
Really?
His defense, he's decent at receiving. He still has some work to do on the throw downs to second base. So I think you could see him and Cole Chamberlain certainly be battling for that backup spot. Third base, Rodriguez. Oh, sorry.
No, you're good, man. Cough it out. This happens to me a lot, especially between the months of December and February. I don't know what's up here during those months, but I get all chewed up.
Yeah, I was sick last week, so.
All right, take your time.
Flores will be shortstop, second baseman Mendoza,
right,
and then first base Schussler, because of the shoulder, is probably going to start. But they've had Stewart, they've had Chamberlain,
right?
So it's those three.
Yeah.
The staff wants to get more left-handed bats in the lineup, so
you're
going to see that movement of who can play, who's hitting, who's hot. So.
Yeah. Do you think I didn't pay any attention to Schlossnagel's teams at A&M other than, just to watch them play, right, when they were playing. Do you think a lot of coaches are like, these are my 9 guys and these are going to be my 9 guys? We saw Pierce, especially last year, kind of play around with that lineup quite a bit and to me, and again, I'm no expert at all on baseball, but it seemed to me like a little deep into the schedule. He still looked like he was playing around with who he wanted and trying to find like what he wanted. Do you think Schloss is these are my 9 guys, I'm going to stick with them type of guy? Or will we see him move those chess pieces around a little bit in these tournaments and sort of before they get into that SEC schedule?
I think you're going to see from this team, you're going to see a lot more running. There's going to be a lot more movement on the bases. Schlossnagel's, he does not bunt, so you're not going to see bunting. And then the third thing is, I think early on you will see who has the hot hand. If Casey Borba's ripping it at DH, he's going to stay there.
Sure.
If Chamberlain's proven himself or Stewart's proven himself, but I think you're also seeing play matchups at times. Hey, if this guy's got a really good breaking ball, do we want the freshman out there taking hacks? Well, maybe not. Maybe we'll want to bring in a guy that's seen more breaking balls from an elite standpoint, right? So you start playing those matchups. You start looking at the analytics, the breakdowns. But I think early on you'll see him start moving pieces around just to get the optimal lineup.
Fair enough. Well, I'll be interested to see what that looks like. I got to ask you, one of my 12-pack comments from Saturday's game, it was just something that popped into my head while I was watching the game and thinking about that outfield. I think am I crazy to think that outfield might be able to hit 45, 50 home runs by themselves?
Yeah, I mean, they've made some mechanical tweaks to Winfield's hitting. I don't necessarily think that's going to lend itself to more power necessarily, but it is a guy that can hit a lot of extra bases. He's going to hit doubles, he's going to hit singles and turn them into doubles just because of his speed and his athleticism out of the box. Certainly Blue, he's got capability of 20 plus, and then you've got Gasparino who hit 12 as a freshman.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's got a little bit better approach, a little more mature approach. He's fixed his stance. Not unheard of to see him go 15, 18. So right there, you've already got, close to 40 home runs. So yeah, certainly this is a team it's going to hit some home runs this year.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was thinking. Between Blue and Gaspo last year, they hit 30, and then you bring in Winfield's 10, that's 40. You got to think a guy like Gaspo and a guy like Winfield are just going to get better. Be more selective. All these guys are guys that if they hit the ball well and get it up, it's going out. Like there's not much that's going to keep them in the park. As far as that goes. So I don't know. I wrote that down and I looked at it and I was like, that sounds crazy, but also I think that's like 100% possible. So I'm going to say, I'm going to drop it right now. You're going to be the man on the show when I do this. I'm going to say that outfield hits 50 plus home runs. They're over 50. Yeah, I'm calling it. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be
hit 50 home runs. This is probably a team that's not necessarily at the Melendez 128, but they're probably pushing 90 plus home runs.
Yeah, and I asked Harge that every year. I ask Harge, are we gonna beat the one? Because at one point last season they were kind of on pace, and as a matter of fact, they were ahead of pace. And so every time I'd have him on, I'd be like, Harge, are we gonna get it? And he'd always say no. Like he wouldn't even think about it. No. And of course he was right. And then he bust my balls earlier this year. I asked him, are we going to get to 128 this year, Harge? He said, no. I'm like, all right, well, we're going to get to 128 one of these years, damn it. I mean, Tennessee hit like 175 or 180 home runs last year.
Yeah.
Like just absurd numbers of home. I mean, I know they play in a little league park,
I
but
would say their park is it plays pretty small, but yeah, I mean, that team was just cranking out home runs like it was nobody's business.
Yeah, they could bust the ball. All right, so we get hopefully we go get some wins at this showdown in Arlington. They play a home series, they play a midweek, and then they head out to the Las Vegas Classic. And I'm pretty sure it's the first time Texas has ever played in the Las Vegas Classic. I could be wrong on that, but I don't even know how long that thing's been going. I got to be honest, I never heard of it until this year, or actually last year when I saw that they put tickets on sale. So anyway, I don't think the Las Vegas Classic will be quite as competitive as the Shriners Baseball Showdown. I mean, you got Washington, Washington for a Northern team, probably pretty good. And then Texas Tech, that'll be another one of those, hey, it's the Big 12. We don't like you. We're going to try to beat you. And they're going to put a lot into that, I think. But then Illinois, I don't know much about Illinois' baseball program. I know two of those three teams don't get to practice outside until, for another 2 or 3 months probably. So Texas should go into that one. And if they're good, they should show pretty well out at that tournament. What do you think? What do you think the coaches are trying to find? And it's probably a stupid question. I mean, obviously they're trying to find people that can pitch and people they can hit, but maybe to this specific team and this specific set of personnel, what do you think Schloss is going to be looking to find in these preseason tournaments?
I think I think the same thing really David Pierce was looking for. He's trying to find defined roles. He wants the guy to be a closer. He wants the guy to be the bridge guy. We probably know who the bridge guys are at this point. You got Andre Duplantier, you got a guy like Will Mercer, bridge to get to whoever the back end guy is. And then, how do we carve out roles for the freshman, Drew Rarick? How do we carve out roles for a guy like Bryce Navarre, who's got kind of that crafty lefty? And then, you have all the other guys that kind of fall in there and slot in. And so for me, I think you got so many bullpen arms that you got to figure out, how do we use this guy? Where do we use this guy? Like Riojas, he could be a starter.
Mm-hmm.
They don't necessarily want him to be a starter, right? And so I think that's the biggest thing for me. And, you mentioned the schedule that midweek. They actually have a pretty tough game on February 18th. They're playing Houston at home, and Houston's no slouch. They brought in the JUCO Player of the Year.
Right.
They got some guys that can really hit. They got Jackson Jelkin back on the mound. Now they're not going to see him on a Tuesday, but
right.
I think that's actually one of the sneakiest hard midweek games they have all year is that Houston matchup there on the 18th.
Yeah, you look at the schedule this year, and it's I think we're used to seeing Texas play some pretty tough preseason schedules. We've played LSU, we've played, we brought in a lot of, I can remember back in the day, South Carolina, when they were good at baseball, playing games against Texas before the conference schedule started. And this year, it doesn't look as tough to me, but it doesn't need to be, because let's talk about that SEC schedule coming up.
Yeah.
I think if you're playing this type of schedule, folks, it doesn't make sense. I think let me be clear. I think in football, I don't like how the SEC schedules Mercer and like Florida Atlantic or, whoever in the week 11 or whatever to get to 8 wins or 9 wins or whatever it is. Those types of games shouldn't happen in football. But in baseball, I mean, listen to this schedule. They start on the road at number 18, and these are all D1 rankings. And you look across, so these teams will be in different spots depending on which poll you're looking at. But according to D1, they start on the road at number 18, Mississippi State, who won the 2021 College World Series. Then they come back home they got number 3, LSU. They get to go on the road to Missouri. I don't know how good Missouri will be this year. They get number 8, Georgia, at home after that. Then they go on the road to Kentucky, who was at the College World Series last year. Maybe get a break with Auburn at home. Then they host a number 1 A&M. Then they go on the road to number 5 Arkansas. They get number 10 Florida at home, and then they wrap it up on the road in the Red River Shootout version, or the baseball version of the Red River Shootout against Oklahoma. That's 6. They play 10 conference series. That's 6 conference series against top 20 teams and 5 against top 10 teams preseason. And we all know as the season starts to go, a lot of these teams are going to move up from where they're at today.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens every single year with the SEC teams. They start where they start, and then people just start moving up. At some point, there'll probably be a top 5 full of SEC teams. Although there are other good baseball teams out there, contrary to popular belief, I think the ACC is pretty loaded. I think those are clearly the two sort of dominant conferences in baseball. It makes sense. They're in the Southeast or on the East Coast. They get to play a lot of baseball, nice weather all the time. So what should Texas fans expect out of a schedule like that? What is realistic for this Texas team, not knowing anything else? Like, Texas goes and plays good baseball. What should the record look like headed through a gauntlet like that?
I mean, realistically, and this sounds crazy, but you get to 36 wins, 15 of which are conference wins, and you're probably thinking this was a successful first year in the SEC. You look at their midweeks. Their midweeks aren't gimmies either. Like I said, they play Houston. They have UTSA coming in. UTSA's been playing a solid brand of baseball under Hallmark. They got 2 games against Texas State, and then they have who was it? Oh, Lamar. I mean, a lot of people thought Lamar should have been in the tournament last year, and so
Lamar had a really good season last year,
and they returned a lot of their arms and a lot of their guys, and so I mean, if you're gonna have to stack Idaho Conference wins, they need to win these midweek games. They need to go win some of these games in Arlington. They need to win some games in Vegas. They're not going to have the same problems they've had in the past. Like last year, their biggest issue was didn't matter that they did amazing in Big 12 play. Their non-conference was so weak with the RPI, it absolutely crushed them.
Right.
And so they're not going to have an RPI issue going forward. It's just, Schlossnagle likes to say, like, the bare minimum, you need to get to 15 wins. When you get to 15 wins in the SEC, you're praising it. You get ready for the postseason because that's you're headed to postseason, right? And that puts you in the not in just a regional, but potentially in a contention to host a regional. So,
depending on who you beat,
you go beat a team like Florida or Arkansas on the road, and all of a sudden that does wonders for your RPI. So,
exactly. We haven't talked about it much. We've talked about the weekend starters. Who do you think they start out with for the midweek starter this year?
I think that's another thing that, they're going to kind of feel out. Certainly you could see a young freshman like Bryce Navarre get a nod. Cody Howard is another guy that likely is going to get an early nod just because of his experience and his ability, especially to stretch out. Long term, it would not shock me to see a guy like Drew Rarick kind of ease his way into that Tuesday night role, just with the ability he has, kind of the mentality he has. Mm-hmm. He was a little nervous on Saturday during the alumni game. That showed. He was a little amped up. But, you get him out there, and I think, he has the ability and like I said, the mentality is the biggest thing I've heard about him is he's not afraid. And you can't have someone afraid to go out there and just throw hard. So,
yeah. What do you think the ceiling is for this Texas team? Like, would it, are we looking at a team that probably makes the postseason, but probably doesn't advance too far into the postseason, or are we looking at a team that, and I know this is a hard question because we haven't seen any baseball yet, really. Just looking at the tools that Schlossnagle has, do you think he's got a roster that could make it to Omaha?
I think he's got the hitting that can make it to Omaha, yeah. I think if pitching, some things go the right way, they stay healthy, they have an outside chance. He likes to hearken this team as very similar to his first year at A&M, where it was a bunch of transfers that they threw together because that roster was not been tended well to. And, they ended up making the College World Series. So I think if he's seeing those similarities, then if things break right, no injuries, they get the right matchups, yes, they could certainly make a run. I personally think just on paper, from what I've seen, I think probably super regionals is where I slate them in. Is like if they make super regionals, I'm like, okay, that's year one.
It's a good season, yeah.
Let's go reload. That was a good season. Let's reload with some new roster talent and keep stacking. Personally, I think 2 years, they're probably 2 seasons away from being able to contend for a title, just based on where the roster talent is, where they're at in conference, etc. So,
fair enough. Give us your surprise player, like the guy. Who do you think by the end of this season? People have heard of him probably because baseball rosters aren't that big, but But who's the guy you think steps up this year, and by the end of the year we're talking more about than we're talking about today?
Ooh, that's a tough one. From the hitting side, I think you have to look at someone like a Cole Chamberlain, maybe, or maybe like a Jock Stewart. Like Jockey Stewart, that dude can bop, and he's really transformed himself. He's dropped 20, 30 pounds since he got to campus. If you look at his numbers when he was at Northwest Florida State last year, I mean, they're impressive. The dude can hit. So one of those two guys I could see come through as a DH or first baseman and really surprise folks. On the pitching side, I think a guy like Aiden Moffitt, it sounds crazy to talk about a guy that throws 98, but if he can continue to harness that control and that command, that's a weapon that not many people have that can roll out and just, mow through a lineup. So, yeah,
I think out of everything I saw on Saturday, those 3 innings he pitched really, really impressed me. Like, I am excited about seeing what that guy can do in a game situation, what his role looks like. To me, he'd be a guy that I would love to be able to see come in like middle relief and get you 2 or 3 innings, or be a guy that comes in and closes everything out for you because he's got that that fastball. There's probably other guys on the team that are throwing the same velocity he is, but there's something about that fastball. It just pops out at you, and it's in the mitt like the second he lets it go.
If you rewatch the replay of the alumni game, watch the batter's reaction, especially the left-handed hitters. Watch the reaction when that fastball has some late cut and comes to that inside. Yeah, every single one of them was stepping back like, I don't want any part of that.
You hear about movement and pitching all the time, and we played a tournament down in Austin last year, and we played against the Allen Eagles, and I can't remember the kid's name, but the sophomore pitcher on that team was the district pitcher of the year as a freshman. We sat right behind the plate and watched that lefty, and man, those poor kids we ended up winning the game 1-0. We hit a home run and won the game. But other than that, this guy was untouchable, and it was because of that late run. I mean, he would throw it; it would come right on the outside of the plate and then just go away. Even when the guys were timing it, it was just gone. That late movement on a fastball, not only is it probably really, really scary, but obviously so effective and it almost makes it impossible to hit. Like you have to do so much stuff these days. I don't know how guys hit a baseball. It's really pretty phenomenal that there's some guys that can hit a baseball 3 to 4 times out of 10 and just kind of make it look easy. Because I don't think people realize how much movement there are on these pitches and just the huge drastic change in velocity between pitches. You really got to guess right, and then you got to time it right, and then you got to hope it doesn't go away on you. And not easy to do that, obviously. You looking up that pitcher?
Yeah, I was trying to remember because the name I can see his face, and it's just driving me crazy.
Yeah, he's a real tall, skinny kid, and he's probably. I mean, he'll fill out too, but I think he's probably 6'4", 6'5". We played against him, and then we played that kid from Grapevine, and I couldn't even see the ball come. I could not even see the ball from the stands when he was throwing it. He was touching 98, and he was sitting like 95 that whole game, and it was just like, sorry guys, we're not advancing.
Yeah.
Well, we're not going to win game 1 at least. So it's a 3-game series, but we're definitely not winning game 1. Zach, I appreciate you. He is Zachary Symm of orangebloods.com. He's also a contributor over at secunfiltered.com. Again, find him on X at Zach at the Dish. Make sure you give him a follow. I've been following him the last week or so. A lot of good information, news, analysis on Texas baseball. Check him out there. I am Sean Redfern of the Horn Takes podcast, contributor at secunfiltered.com as well. You can find me on X at Sean_Redfern right there on the screen. You can find the Horn Takes podcast on TikTok, X, and YouTube at Horn Takes. Make sure to follow, subscribe. You guys have a good night. Zachary, appreciate it, my friend. We will definitely have you back to talk some more baseball if you're interested.
Absolutely, my man. It was a great time.
Absolutely. Have a good one. We'll see you.
All right. Take care.